And I don't have a college degree. I've been to 5 colleges, got what I wanted out of it, and moved on. I've been looking forward a long time to this, and I really didn't think that a college education or getting a job with a big company or solid firm or something like that was the ticket to my future. I got what I wanted out of it, and then moved on and did what I was going to do. And but I've probably done more reading than most of my friends who were in college and who got their degrees. So years ago, before I even moved to Israel, there was a book that I saw on Amazon about sustainable gardening in dry areas, written by Elaine Soloway, Dr. Elaine Soloway, who's a professor at the Arava Institute in Keturah. And I wrote her an email, which was my practice. I would often write to authors, and there was a reason behind it all. I mean, a lot of times when you write these authors, they say, wow, someone's actually reading my book, and they send you more books. So I would get 3 books that way. But in Elaine's case, I really wanted some answers, some questions, and I asked her some questions about her first book, and then she wrote another book, and I was after her to get a copy of that because it's very difficult to get. There were only so many they made. They're not real popular books on perennial polyculture, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. And she's the one who introduced me to the research chemist from Ben Gurion University, who had been working for General Motors for 3 years on trying to solve the ethanol production problem, how to increase the level of production. And for 3 years, they hadn't come up with a solution. They came to me in 10 minutes. I told him this is how it worked, and he was all excited about it, and off we were going into business together. So Elaine is she's like my older sister now. I mean, I love her. We became very good friends, after coming here, and she even honored me by letting me edit her 3rd book, which was on trees and all the various uses of trees. See, our agricultural system is built up not because these are the best plants or because they're the most productive plants or things. The world grows. I mean, the world production, when you take the tonnage of the world production of all the world's foodstuffs, the top 20, it goes down very quickly, from like the top 5, and it goes down to amazingly low levels in just the top 20 different types of foodstuffs. And you take the top 100, and you're talking about hardly anything. The bottom down there is hardly any weight. Most people are eating the same things, and most of these crops are quite inbred and quite specialized, and are dependent upon the whole set of chemicals to protect them from the environment and from insects and pests, and on other the things. The whole system is set up around these frail plants. And that's not how man has lived. Most of the history of man has been based upon perennial crops. So your grains, most of your grains, the grains that are commercialized, are annual crops. You have to plant them annually every year. Now there are perennial grains, but they don't have the production levels, and they have production problems. How do you harvest them, and how do you do it? With the machinery that we have, there's problems with it. So the system kind of drove what was being produced and what we eat. So Elaine has been worried about these same issues for a long time, and she found that I was worried about them, and I had some solutions, and I was worried about not facing the issues. I'm not worried about the issues. I'm not worried about the outcome. I'm worried about that my family wouldn't face the issue. Once you face it, it's okay. Okay? So Elaine and I became friends, and that's how the parallel process system, almost became commercialized and started. And if we had set up a demonstration farm, I'm sure that there would have been a lot of kibbutzim and moshavim that would have been interested in that, because they all have the same problems. What do we do with all the young people? How do we get economy going here? How do we keep it together? First of all, I want to make this really clear. I always think this is so funny. All I'm doing is copying what farmers always did. People think that, why, of course, gasoline and diesel, those are the only things that people ever ran machinery on, right? Isn't that so? No. The first engine ran on peanut oil. There's lots of things that you can fuel engines with, and what most farmers fueled their equipment with was ethanol, because they could make ethanol. Ethanol was basically concentrated grain. It was for centuries. The Whiskey Rebellion in Pennsylvania history, in American history, the Whiskey Rebellion was about farmers getting upset because the farmers that lived out on the frontier, again the peripheries, the ones that lived out on the frontier, they had good crops. But if you put them on the back of animals and had the animals carry them to, say, Philadelphia to sell them, the animals would eat so much to get there that it wasn't worth it. They couldn't make enough money, and then to take the animals back, they couldn't make enough money. So what did? They took all their grains and made whiskey, because one animal could carry several animals, 16 animals worth of grain on their back in the form of whiskey. So, but the people in the city said, well, let's tax that whiskey. So that's what the rebellion was over, taxing their profits. So a little sidebar history there, but it's important, because that's what always happens. There's not too many people out there in the frontier, the periphery areas, and so they have to be smarter, because they can't just do it the way the people are doing it in town. And they don't look at the people in town to save their ass, because it ain't going to happen. Excuse me, but okay. So Elaine has been interested, as I am, in how do we prepare for this future that's coming. And what are we going to need? Well, one of the things we're going to need is seeds, and we're going to need seeds of plants that are adapted for the world that's coming, not adapted for the world that was, not adapted for irrigation systems and things like that. For example, simple example, wheat and sorghum. We're all familiar with wheat, because that's how we make our pizza dough, and how we make our cinnamon rolls, and how we make our bread and pita and what have you. But you can make all those products out of dhurra too. It's slightly different. It has different levels of gluten and sugars and different things. But if we had never had wheat and all we'd ever had was dhurra, then if someone tried to tell you about wheat, so what do I need wheat for? I got dhurra. Well, it turns out wheat, even though it doesn't take much water to grow wheat, it takes twice as much water to grow wheat as it does dhurra. So that opens up vast amounts of land that we now categorize as non-arable, that you can't farm in. Yeah, you could if you were growing dhurra. You see what I'm saying? This changes the equation depending upon what you grow with it. And the thing about sorghum is so varied that in Africa, where sorghum is the staple crop in those regions, the people in the markets can actually tell what farm the sorghum was grown on by the color and markings of the seeds. It's like their own natural barcoding. It's that varied. There's so many different varieties of Dura, and you have short Duras and tall Duras, and you have Duras that make brooms. That's what they used to make brooms out of. It's real stiff. Then you have Dura that's real flexible, and you have Dura with fibers, and you have Dura that has a lot of sugar in it. You make sorghum syrup out of it. It's like a replacement for sugar cane. Duras that have more gluten in it would make better wheats, and with development you could make it even better. You can make beer out of Dura. It's a wonderful product, but it's not commercial. We don't use it commercially. So that's just one example. And you can get Dura also grows very quickly, so you can get 3 crops of Dura per year where I live, where you can only get 1 crop of wheat. So that's a grain crop, but she's also interested in, as I am, in perennial shrubs, perennial trees, and that's what our last book features on, shrubs and trees. And whole economies, there's areas in Italy where their whole economy was based on oaks and acorns, and they basically, it's great because oak trees live hundreds of years, and they would plant these oak tree forests, and it's a little bit of tending and cleaning up the underbrush and what have you, but it was basically a pretty nice life because there's only this big flurry of activity whenever the acorns were ready to harvest, and then processing them into flours and different things that they made out of it, and then the rest of the year it was doing other more fun things than working hard. So the problems with annuals is they're a lot of work, and perennials are not such hard work. So anyhow, there's a lot of advantages to perennials, and people really should look into them. There's some excellent new books out on perennials, and the key is to develop perennials that are adapted well to your environment, the local environment. I know it's changing, but plants adapt at about the speed that climate changes, so you need to get something in there. One of the shortages that are real critical is in the 3 key elements that plants need to grow: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and NPK. And your typical annual crop that people will industrially or farm strips these minerals from the top 6 inches of the ground. The nitrogen is added from fossil fuels, but the naturally occurring elements in the top surface of the ground, it strips it from that, and so the soils become depleted. Well, it's not like all the soil all the way down to the core of the earth is depleted, it's just that part is. And because they're annuals, the roots never get that deep. And they keep ripping them up and starting new ones, ripping them up, starting new ones, and they're all like reusing the same little thin area of the surface. Well, the advantage of a perennial plant is they get to put down really, really, really deep roots, and so they can bring up these minerals from deep down. And in Africa, they've tested the idea of alley cropping in between trees, and using the trees to bring up the fertilizers. And how do they do that? Well, they bring it up and they build their leaves, and then when they shed their leaves, the leaves fall on the ground and put those minerals into the surface, including the nitrogen. So they get their NPK and all the other trace elements that plants need in the leaves, in the organic material on the top of the ground. So it cuts down to nothing the amount of fertilizer after the trees are big and mature, cuts down to nothing the amount of fertilizer the farmers have to buy. This vastly increases their productivity and their profitability, and makes their lives better. So we're very interested in trees that we can grow here in Israel without irrigation. Unfortunately, that's not the trees that are here now. I mean, now we have oranges and lemons and pomelos and clementinas and all these wonderful things that require oceans of water, and these trees are they're not going to make it.